Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jamie Machek with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service, and thank you for joining us today for our marketing webinar series, Marketing in the Library. So 2 weeks ago, we had Kathy Dempsey. She's actually listening in today. Hi, Kathy. She spoke about doing an external communications audit, and today we're going to continue that conversation, continue down that same path, and Jennifer Burke is going to talk to us about creating compelling copy and how to effectively tell your library's story. I love Jennifer's energy and passion for marketing and in libraries. I loved hearing her talk about candy corn as well. I know you will love her energy and passion as well. So Jennifer, whenever you're ready, please begin.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this series. And I think you're learning great things. I know you did from Kathy, and I know you're going to from Patrick as well for those who come back for the next webinar in the Marketing the Value of Your Library series. So one of the things that my library colleagues have told me I do really well in terms of professional development is how to. Let's get into you want to have a plan, you want to be smart about it, but okay, how do we actually go about doing some of these things? Because I know that none of them were covered in my MLS program, and chances are they haven't been covered in any of the programs that you've taken. So let me make sure that, aren't we advancing? There we go. So there's a brief background. You got to all see this in the bio that was whizzing by in the cool video that Jamie showed you. The brief rundown is my MSLIS, there's a mouthful, is from Drexel University. I did also go on and spend about 7 years doing additional research in digital libraries, education, while at Drexel in a PhD program, but I left to do other things because there's other ways to be teaching. And I've written, and the thing that I may be the most proud of right now in terms of the contribution I'm making back to the library community is being the founding president of the nonprofit that runs the extremely popular Library Marketing and Communications Conference. We are getting ready to go into our 5th. We are sold out once again. We keep moving to bigger and bigger hotels. So people love us, and we're obviously talking to the right target audience in the right niche. It's lovely when your marketing actually works like it's supposed to. So today I want to talk a little bit about stories. And it's always a great thing. I love talking about stories to libraries because you're like, who knows stories better? But I also want to think about the fact that what we're talking about in telling stories and telling the library's story, oops, maybe we're not as good as we could be, And that's where learning some of the tips and the tricks in writing for marketing comes in. Because writing for marketing is different than writing in other instances. And I think we all know that sort of inherently, but it doesn't have to feel weird and it doesn't have to be weird. We just have to take actually some of those things we know from the stories that we're already immersed in, being in the library, and turn it to the library itself. And so the presentation is sort of set in 2 parts, talking a little bit about marketing messages and story, and the stories that our libraries need to be sharing more of. And we'll take a little pause, and the second half is, okay, let's talk some nitty-gritty shortcuts, templates, and the copywriting compelling message hacks that I picked up from throughout my career. And the part that maybe went whizzing by in my bio, and it's not on that screen that I just showed you, is that my very first career, I was an advertising executive in New York and in Philadelphia. And I learned strategy and message and all of that from brands you've heard of and seen and purchased in Target and CVS. That's why I get to combine that and while I've learned and all that's changed in the past 25 years to what I know in terms of libraries. And you all get to be here and share that with me. At the end of the day, though, I want you to be able to be thinking about the emotions that you evoke in your library's audience. We're going to talk about the heroes in our library stories, and you hopefully will be able to walk away and think about one story arc, one common story type that you're going to craft a message and a visual around for a piece of marketing in the next month. I start just about all of my webinars, my presentations, my workshops asking this. Why are we marketing? And the question I want all of you to ask yourselves is, why should my community care about this particular message? And we need to ask it before every message, before every flyer, every post on social media, the videos that we create, when we're going off and we're doing outreach, when we are marketing both the services and the programs and the events in your library. Why will my community care about this message? And if we're not sure, then we need to take a step back and we need to work on our story and we need to work on our message. But keep coming back to it, keep asking yourself, and if you walk away with nothing else, walk away with a picture of a cool dog and a cat, and think about asking yourself before you create another flyer for another program, what do I need to put in this that my community cares about? So, and if anybody has any, thoughts, they can pop those in as we go along, but this is the one that I want you to take away and to remember. So another little fun questions, and this isn't nearly as fun as asking you about Reese's peanut butter cups or candy corn, but 2 questions. First, type in the chat window what you think or what you feel if I say the marketing term copy. I'd have quotes around it, but copy. Tell me in the chat window what that means to you right now. I don't care if a dictionary definition. I'll take a sip of.
Okay, so use your question box to type in your comments, and we're getting some ideas in already. So I am seeing the words plagiarize, I'm seeing text, writing, verbiage, print. Copy equals written content of promotional materials. Words, text again. Creation, which forms the basis of a message. So you get the idea.
Cool. Excellent. Good. So, all right, good. We're mostly on the same page. And then I love the folks who said copy and they went for the running it through the Xerox, the copy machine, plagiarizing copy.
Yes.
Because again, the word can have different things. And this is just thinking about it. We're trying to put on our hats and think about it from a marketing perspective. And several of you were absolutely on. And then the next question, because I told you why should my community care and why are we marketing? We're talking stories today. Throw in the chat window some of your suggestions on why we as the library need to tell a story. And you can be putting that in the chat window, and I'm going to flip in a second to some of the reasons why I think we need to be telling stories.
All right, so Tina says, so people understand our value. Brandon says, we are an institution full of stories. We are the information highway. Susan writes, to make people aware of services that could benefit them, to remind people of our relevance. We need to make the need for libraries personal to individuals.
Oh, good one.
Cindy says,
good one.
Advertising. Again, to remind people of their relevance. How else do people know what we're doing? It's their library.
Oh, I love that one. All right, we're going to go with that. Keep that one in mind as that one. Good one. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you.
And it's absolutely why they should care. And then the next part is, why are we specifically telling stories? Because stories help people remember. We're talking about all the reasons why they want to value the library, the fact that it is their library, that we do have all of these services for them, that we do have all these resources and the programs and the events. And guess what? We are all walking around with giant squirrel brains. We are distracted every day, every minute by shiny objects out there and by the things that they have to worry about for their kids and the things that they're needing to worry about for their parents. And we think about the library every day because we're there. That's our jobs. That is not what's on the mind of everybody else that we're trying to connect with. So we need them to remember. We also tell stories because we are trying to influence decisions. That audiences go out and they construct their own story in their head about what the library is or is not right now. And we know how badly that can go off the rails sometimes if we don't give them a clearer, better story. stories are about connecting to the community. And the people who said it is your library, absolutely. And there's studies that are done amongst nonprofits overall that show, and this can apply, that show that donors give twice as much when they hear a story about an affected individual as opposed to when they just get facts and stats. So for the people who said that we're about trying to make the marketing and the message personal, absolutely. That's the only other reason we're telling stories. We're telling a story and not just presenting facts and stats because we have to cut through clutter and noise. We are not the only story that they are hearing out there. We have to give them context, that stories can help ground the rest of the outreach and the advocacy that we do. Context helps those in our community see the challenges that our users may face and how we are solving problems for our users. Also, if you have a good, clear, succinct library story, or you have several clear, succinct stories that you can keep telling and repeating in different types of marketing, then you're helping your staff, your board, your bosses, and the elected officials and stakeholders for your libraries to do their job. Because when they go out and talk about why else you need funding, why more money needs to go back to the library and not to other departments in the university, they need to know the story, and they need to know how the library is having a real impact in lives of their communities, of their constituents. They need to know how a decision is going to impact a real person in a real place. And stories that the library tells about itself, but more importantly about its users, help make that connection. And it makes it a lot easier for somebody to advocate on the behalf of your library when they've got that clear, compelling story and that clear, compelling message of what to do next. So again, we're thinking, well, this should be pretty easy because, whoever said the library is literally a building full of stories. Yes, there's a joke out there about that, but we are full of stories. We should know this. And we know that they're emotional and inspirational and educational, and that they're relationship builders, and they create connections, and everybody loves a story. We are wired for stories. So that's the first thing I tell folks about library marketing, is that marketing is storytelling. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be icky. We're not even talking just advertising or promotion or PR. We're talking about telling stories. Marketing is strategic storytelling because we're telling the story with a point. We want somebody to do something with that message, whether it's to sign up for that particular event, to show up for the author event, to be there at story time, to show up and use the items in your makerspace. You're telling a story. And you've taken time out today because you know how important that is. You know how important it is to be speaking up and speaking out for your library. And hopefully you all know, because you're here and you've attended maybe some of the other great WVLS continuing education programs and the other ones in this particular series, that marketing can't just be another duty as assigned. That we all have the power to tell the story of the library, and we do it every day. And that's how we continue to advocate and to move forward. So we're going to have a real short refresher because you know library, you know stories, you know libraries. We should understand the basics of the story. But I want to refresher on this quickly and to show that classic storytelling elements absolutely can become classic marketing story elements. Again, just reinforcing that stories are better for conveying your marketing message than just a stat, just a number, or a fact. There's a place for all of those, annual reports, and in some instances in other forms, but we're going to add a little later on, we're going to add a little consumer psychology and persuasive language, and now we're going to get a marketing story. Classic story plots, the up, down, climax, crisis, resolution. This is important because two of the formulas I'm going to show you in the copy hacks later on today basically follow this exact story arc, beginning, middle, end, problem, agitation, solution. That's kind of like the opening, crisis, climax, denouement of all these famous stories that we've seen in the classic story plots of the hero's journey, quests, voyages, Back to the Future, Harry Potter, Star Wars, all have classic story elements, but so do a lot of really excellent marketing messages and ads. So the things that we're going to remember is that we're setting up a situation or a problem, and we're going to also show them a solution. That's most of what the marketing story is about. And I'm not going to get into the details of classic story plots. I think if anybody's not familiar, we can, show folks some examples for that. I also want to touch on the fact that we need to remember who's the hero in the marketing story that we're telling. Sorry, I flip around on my screen and my mouse gets lost. There's a story. So there are some very classic from marketing story formats that work no matter whether you're doing a video, whether you write an article, a blog post, it becomes a press release, that they are key things that people want to know about companies, brands, organizations, nonprofits, including the library. Those are brand stories, personal, origin, our top stories about our products and our services. Obviously, one of the key ones is talking actually about the patrons themselves, patron or customer generated stories. Let's not forget to tell the stories of our staff, and even maybe, we'll use the word case study, although that's going to look a little bit different from a library. Those are where we're talking about an example maybe of a specific instance where we solved a particular problem. And it can even be somebody who had a particular skill. Here's the video, they learned it through the resource that the library had, and then they were able to go out and they got a job interview because they had learned this skill thanks to the free resources that the library offered. In marketing parlance, that's a case study. From the library, that's marketing gold in terms of showing what's going on. A little trick, I just came back actually from a content marketing event, and there was a brilliant researcher there who was talking about the fact that one of the things that helps us when we're telling stories, when we're making connections, is to ground it and to get specific. And what she kept having us remember was, tell me about a time when. And when you get specific in the story, either of what you're asking your customers to tell you or the story you're telling about a time when the library did blank, when you solved a problem for a particular patron, that it becomes more specific, and all of a sudden it becomes much more memorable. It's a much better connection. You're going to help check off all those check boxes from that slide early on about why we tell stories. So this is a little bit of an exercise in brainstorming, and you all can answer some questions in the chat for me if you want, or jot down on some paper or make a note to yourself to come back to this. Because we want to think about the library and the hero in the library story. And one of those was, think about and write about, tell me a time when your library overcame a specific challenging situation. What was the challenge? How did you overcome it? Another great one that's another great story. And if you have one, you can throw some in the chat window. But tell me about a time when your library staff went beyond to deliver for a member of your community. And you could tell me about a time when your staff, and I put this in quotes, quested to solve a problem for patrons. And that's tying back into that one of that common story arc. So it might be somebody who was out there doing reader's advisory and they had to track down a book that a patron had remembered. I mean, I love seeing all of these on social media where everybody's doing this all the time. And patrons are usually, oh my God, thank you so much. I haven't remembered that book in 35 years. You quested. You can tell the elements of the story of that classic hero's journey quest in your marketing message and said, well, we had this problem. The patron came to us. Like, this here is all we could remember, but Our staff member went out, they did this and they did this. They found out the answer, and the patron was so thrilled. Believe it or not, that's a marketing story, because you're helping showing the connection of what you actually do and the impact it's having on a member of your community's life. So Jamie can let me know if anybody decided to share any stories, or if you're all thinking about that one for later.
Yeah, I think I'm sensing a lot of thinking, but I'll keep an eye on things and share if I see anything.
Keep an eye on things. If something comes up through the webinar, by all means, drop it in. You can also brainstorm and flesh out that story. One of the things that I mentioned is customer or patron and user-led storytelling, using the content that your library's users want to create. They're already out there creating that. Harness it. They're already on social media. Why? It also builds engagement. It builds trust. You're expanding the library's reach because you're tapping into the reach of your library users. It's social proof, which is something we want in terms of marketing, because let's face it, the truth of the matter is we listen more to what our friends say and recommend to us than what some named authority source says. In that case, that's us. Yes, give a framework, give a set of ground rules, check to make sure it fits your organization style guide, but be flexible and empower your staff to reach out and ask your users for content and to participate. And there's some examples on here of various libraries who have had great success, particularly on social media and using user-generated content. From my friend John Jackson down at Loyola Marymount University, he's got a couple of the ones on the bottom where they did a student-led social media takeover. They also took over the entire university's Snapchat account at one point. John's the one in the bow tie. And this has worked for both really small university libraries, like the one St. Peter's University in New Jersey. It's worked for much larger libraries. This is, an absolute way to get involved, to creating great content and great storytelling. Social media takeovers, doing outreach, and maybe the social media takeover is from one of your community's influencers or stakeholders. Community partnerships from your board, from volunteers, other departments, staffs, the college dean, the college mascot, local artists. So just a thought there that, yeah, that all works. It's all telling a story, and it's important type of storytelling that you can be using. Those are some of the other story ideas we can use. We already do a lot of this. We talk about, there's book talks out there, and you're doing book talks on videos and doing coming attractions. One of the possibly best uses of video that I've seen across libraries of lots of different shapes and sizes is behind the scenes. And it also comes to answer one of those common questions we get when people are like, well, I didn't know the library did that, because we didn't tell them. I have a friend who's a librarian in Arlington, Virginia. And she said one of the most successful things they do is when they have school groups come and the Cub Scouts and the Girl Scouts come. The thing that fascinates the kids the most is the book drop. And they love being on the outside, and they put the book through and they want to see, where does the book go? Because otherwise in their minds it's like this big giant black hole, which is another reason why it's cool when we decorate the book drop. And right now it's Halloween time coming up, and there's a lot of book drop monsters out there. The kids on the tour love the fact that on the back end, they literally got to climb inside. In Arlington, it was a fairly big, giant, open bin area. And the kids got to go inside, and one of them catches the book when their friend shoves it. They're like, I never knew. I didn't know what happened. And then they also took them on the rest of the tour to show, okay, now that the books are inside, here's what we do with them. And then here's how we get them back out so your friends can check out their next book. Like, wow. I've seen libraries do, unpackaging videos from when the new stuff comes in and how it gets out. Great time lapse. Speed this up. Don't show them everything in real time. But showing, how we make decisions about, let's get in the next resource. Let's put together a craft. We're putting together a class. Here's how we make the decision on getting things into the makerspace for you. They want to know how we make those decisions, and we're showing them how this works. And again, it gets getting past any of those misperceptions that might be out there, or those stories that they're creating in their own heads. Well, we get to be a little cool about it and show, come here, I'm going to give you a sneak peek. The curiosity factor is huge in crafting copy and crafting a message for your story. Curiosity is almost always going to get attention, and people are going to want to know more, and they're going to follow you where you want them to go in terms of the marketing story. So the main thing here to remember is, as we're wrapping up the section here, sort of a little bit on, in terms of story, is that I know when I go to conferences, when I know I go to events, and I'm in the online groups with other library professionals, we talk about ourselves. We shout out the successes that we're having, and we also ask for, oh my God, this didn't work. Why? And the question I'm sort of asking is, well, we know how to tell those stories. We're telling them to ourselves at events, but are we telling all of our stories back out to our communities? You know, and why don't more kids and adults know all of our stories? Why do people still act surprised? And good gracious, why are there still mass market news stories out there about, oh my God, did you know the library has ebooks? And we're all sitting around talking to ourselves going, well, yeah, we have had for, decades. Or that we have maker spaces and kids build robots and they play games. And did you know you can actually borrow the board games? And we have board game nights, and we have library comic cons, and the libraries that are like up in Brooklyn, where that one has the video and a green screen, and OMG. And to get rid of those incorrect assumptions, and so that we stop cringing whenever we see awkward, outdated stories in the media, we have to take charge and tell that story, so that when the media publishes something, we've given them a good story about board game night. We've given them a good story about the kids who learned how to code because they're making robots in the library. Those are the kinds of stories that A, need to be out there, and B, the media is going to want to eat up. And that's why you're here, and hopefully why you're thinking about all of this, is because you're going to up your game. You're going to up your library marketing game, and you're going to be strategic about the stories that you're telling. Now here's where we shift into the, okay, nitty gritty, how do we actually do this stuff? And marketing is about inspiring an action. And don't ever forget that part, is that we tell a story, but it's a marketing story when you remember to tell somebody what to do next. I think somebody mentioned CTAs and calls to action. And here's where I get a little nitpicky. Programming is not a story. But the pop-up session with your local fabric art expert is, or how reading to a therapy dog helps a child overcome stuttering and reading anxiety, that's a story. Helping the grandmother to download Tumble books to read with her grandchildren that she is now babysitting every Wednesday and Thursday is a story. And then the next part is making sure that you're connecting it with what in action are you inspiring from them today. Don't forget the call to action. This is a quick checklist on, okay, what makes for an engaging story for marketing? The main thing, purpose. You can relate to it. And here's where we get to the point of, here's the question that I'll ask everybody. When I say you're telling a story, we've talked about quests and heroes. Who is the hero in the library's story or stories? And you can put that in the chat window for a second.
So while you're thinking about the hero, I'd like to share a story that came in. This is great. This is from Susan. And she says, once our staff interrupted a phone scam. The customer came in to use our fax machine to send documents, transferring money to a scam artist. When we realized what was happening, we stopped the crime and helped her report it.
Awesome story.
Here's another one. A patron from another library town in our system needed a Chilton manual to fix his car over the weekend. There was no way he could get to our library before it closed, but one of our staffers was going to visit her sister and had to pass through this town. She took the book with her, met the patron at a gas station, and gave him the book so he could fix his car and make his interview.
Oh my God, that's the most marketing goal. Those two things are absolutely awesome and need to be shared in every format that you can think of, all the time, the rest of the year, forever now, forward.
So as far as
Please tell me in the chat window that you all have shared that story in lots of places.
so as far as the heroes, we had a few responses come in. Someone said patrons, the people who use our library. Another person said our customers. Those are the heroes.
Yay, everybody gets 100%. You got an A grade. I'm going to walk away now. Absolutely. And a reason I have this cool cartoon about sidekicks is the library is the sidekick. We are the cool sidekick. We are Chewie and Luigi, and we are Robin. The hero can't do everything the hero needs to do without us, but we are not. The library itself and even our staff are not necessarily the focus of the story. And that's the thing to remember when you're telling the story. A, have a call to action, and B, that your users and your patrons are the heroes, and you're there to help make sure that they shine. And, let's face it, Captain James Kirk would have gotten into a lot of trouble and blown up a lot of things and alienated a lot more aliens, honestly, if Mr. Spock wasn't there to save him. So we're absolutely essential, but we're the sidekick. So now we're getting back to the question of what is copy? And the answer is there's a couple different marketing definitions. I also want credit for the fact that the illustration on the side I created is literally copy cats, but anyway. I sometimes ask people to count the number of cats and or dogs that appear in my presentations. Know your audience. The main thing to remember is copy is persuasion. Copy is persuasive. You're telling a story with persuasive language because, again, I said marketing was about inspiring an action. And it's everywhere. It's in your emails, your social media, your TV ads, sales pages, websites, all over the place. And somebody else had mentioned that there were different types of copy. Yes, headline copy, body copy. And it does sometimes different things. All of it's persuasive. The other thing to remember is that copy doesn't have to be pushy. Copy is not about looking or feeling like we're in an infomercial. The other thing is to remember is that it is not the same as writing for your annual report, for research reports. It's not the same as a news article. Shorter is always better. Phrases are okay. Don't use your $50 words here. And we're going to talk about calls to action in a minute, but remember, if you want them to do something, get really specific with what the thing is you want them to do. Do you want them to like the library's Facebook page? Do you want them to leave a comment? Do you want them to share an event that you all put on Facebook? What do you want them to do?
Hey, Jennifer.
And asking, yes.
I have a quick question, and it's timely here.
Yes.
So
that's right. We were going to pause more here, right?
Awesome. So you're talking about that call to action and what do you want people to do? How do you do that without coming across as salesy or pushy? Because when I see copy for a lot of library marketing, I see, do this or don't miss out or be there or you should do this, which I think can come across as bossy and pushy. So how do you do that?
Well, the good news is I believe slide 26 says some examples of calls to action. The other is that we've made up in our heads that it is bossy when it's not. That you have to remember that because of all the squirrel brains we're walking around living with and how much out there is coloring, that it is actually a service. It is of service to our audience to tell them, hey, don't miss this thing. We know you want this. We know you love story time, so don't miss it. Because there are so many other messages out there in front of them. And when we get too polite and too vague and too wishy-washy, then they miss the message. And they miss the thing that they actually wanted to attend or to do. Part of that is, honestly, it's a mindset issue. Part of that is you try different language and you see, oh, we got more clicks on our post when we did this. Oh, when we made this the invitation, we think more people signed up and showed up at this event. But I get that that's still a thing where we're like, I don't know if I really want to ask. Yeah, we have to ask,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily have to be like with the red neon sale, sale, sale kind
Right,
of thing
right.
going
Okay, thank you.
on. Yeah, other questions, thoughts, comments after we talk stories, and now that I jumped into copies and copycats.
I'm not seeing any questions come in, but actually there was one before. Early on, you talked about the story, like the types of stories that we can tell. So the brand, the personal, the origin, the customer oriented stories. What, in your experience, what do you think in general we as a profession are already doing really well, if we are doing anything well, and where do we need improvement, and what types of stories? Like, where are we
Ooh,
lacking?
great one. Let me looking back at my list. I think um, I think we tell some good. I think we tell some brand stories. We tell some origin stories well. Um, and for those who anybody want to ever look this up, you can also look up, the Nike waffle iron story for a great origin of a brand or a product story. I think we sometimes forget that we have stories to tell about things that are other than just events in libraries.
Right.
I think we don't tell enough of the, you could call it the case study, the example of, hey, this happened, and then the librarian that worked with the person, and then we did this, and then yay. Um, Certainly not as many stories where we are gathering content and sharing from our customers and our patrons if we can get them to work with us on the story. If anything, we tend to think, and we talk stories broadly, high level. The library is an important institution type of story.
Mm,
Like, no, get more specific than that.
okay. Okay.
That's where you start to see more success and people start to remember stories more.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. And here's just the reminder of, we're writing to get people to do something. Whether it's our social media, our flyers, whatever. So there are 3 ABCs in copy, and we've already started touching on this. Part of it goes back to the notion of who's the hero in the story, that it's always the other person. We have to, so talk about you, talk about yours, talk to them, use less I, me language. Use less about, well, the library did blank. Figure out a way to turn the story around. Turn literally the headline, your message, in your flyers, in your blog posts, in your social media posts around, so that it's either coming to or better addressed to your users. The B is a little awkward. It's burnish, which is another reason for sign and edit, and why we all need to just put something aside and come back to it for 24 hours, or even when we don't have 24 hours because we have to get it out, at least walk away for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, and then come back. And then the C, of course, is call to action. And so Jamie's asked some good questions. We're hopefully going to get some more examples of calls to action. The other thing, and now this is one that affects all types of folks who, in other words, everybody who isn't paid to work, in New York and work at the ad agencies, we fall into this trap where we talk about the features of something. And when I do the day-long copy workshop that I teach, we really pick apart ads. But you can do this at home. Go grab an ad out of the next magazine that you see, out of something that you're reading at home. Pick anything, literally flip through, pull one out. Is it talking in benefits or is it talking in features? And circle what their call to action is. You can also look at it, and just because somebody has spent millions of dollars to run that ad in that magazine, honestly doesn't mean it's a very good one. So it's okay if you look at it and you go, I can't find a call to action. Great, don't copy that one. We can't assume that people will use our services merely because we told them that those services exist. Features are factual statements about products. Features say what something does. A feature is going to tell somebody how many books are in Hoopla. A feature is going to tell them how many things they can download out of Libby. Features, sometimes patrons need to know features, but what they really want to know is the benefit. Why does it matter to them that they can have up to 10 downloads per month? Why does it matter to them that there's X many millions of titles inside of Libby? Features are 100% true, but they're just not enticing, and we aren't the only ones who have this problem. Car manufacturers do this all the time still. They talk about horsepower and how many folding seats there are and miles per gallon, when the real benefit is if your truck has X amount of horsepower, then that means there's a great amount of torque, and it means your truck and the brand new boat that you just bought and you're trying to tow don't slide back down the boat ramp into the lake. Car manufacturers sometimes shortcut by now showing you truck, boat, ramp, and they're hoping that you make that connection mentally in your head. Oh, the truck pulled the boat up out of the water as opposed to leaving it in the lake. But the better way to do the ad is to talk about the benefits. What are the values? What are the emotional benefits? So the two stories you shared earlier, oh my God, the person was able to get to their interview and potentially get the job. That's a huge benefit. The feature was they got the book they needed. They needed Chilton's. Somebody went out of their way to get them that book. But, the emotional benefit of I'm going to be able to feed my family because I got a job today, because I fixed my car, because the librarian brought me the book. So here's a little exercise. That's a coffee maker. That's actually my coffee maker. Mine doesn't look nearly that clean anymore. So it has the features of automatic brewing, automatic shut off on a 12-cup capacity. Great. Anybody want to put in the chat window what they think the benefits of any of those features are?
Well, I think that you can make your coffee the night before and you can have it quicker.
Exactly. So now I've just saved time because, absolutely, that is one. So another one, so for example, there we go. Exactly. I don't have to worry about getting out of the house on time in the morning, or in this case, I work from home. So it's more my husband doesn't worry about missing his train in the morning because we set the coffee up the night before and it automatically went off bleeping early in the morning and it was hot and fresh and ready to go. The coffee company can talk about the fact that the automatic shutoff means I don't ever worry about when I leave that the coffee maker is still on and it's going to burn and scorch or break the pot. 12 cups means if anybody stops by to see me during the middle of the day, there's still enough coffee in the pot. Or that there's absolutely no way my husband could possibly bogart and drink all of the coffee before I can get my chance at some mornings. But you see, features. We think that people buy about features. No, they buy because of, and they make donations and they take action because of benefits. And that's the other one of the top reasons I could get folks in libraries to, when they're talking and writing, especially about all of the cool features that we have, all of the cool electronic resources. If they're going to talk about Hoopla or Canopy or Libby or Ancestry or any of the great resources that isn't an event, take and figure out at least one benefit and potentially one emotional benefit there is about that product or that service and the features that it offers. So this is something that I do, and if you have time, you can play this yourself. But when we have longer time, we go through, okay, is that a feature or is that a benefit? And including the fact that I've thrown in here several that are actually examples from some libraries that I know and that I've worked with. I'm like, feature or benefit? One of those is from the New York Public Library. One of those is actually from my home library, the Bucks County Library. I'm like, well, the fact that we have sensory story times and they're 30 minutes and they're interactive, all of those things are true. None of that's a benefit. So if that's how you're writing about your sensory story times, you're going to need to switch it up some. And this was my I don't care. Because just because we know that the product is really awesome and it's going to make our patrons' lives better, we cannot assume that they will figure that out or that they will know that. Jamie, here's our calls to action. So I don't know whether this is going to help or not, but part of it's also we just have to sometimes get over our heads on this. An action verb and a specific time frame makes for calls to action. So even saying something like, would you share this with your friends today, is a call to action, and that's not quite as pushy for one. Telling them we want to click to register right now, click to register today, before all the seats are gone, is a call to action. It can be softer even, like if you want to get your email so you can send your patrons email marketing message, then telling them, hey, to be the first to hear about all the new books we receive, please share your email below. Well, I want to hear about new books. Okay. And they can be really direct. Donate now. The other ones are softer. The main thing is we can't assume, don't be vague, don't be passive. And I wish I could have probably highlighted more, and you can't see that here, I'll move my mouse over here. The so what factor. We have this in terms of in advertising. Every time you're writing something, every time you're writing a flyer, every time you're writing something where you want somebody to do an action for your library, ask so what. It's the greatest copy hack there is. And then ask so what again until you're like, oh wow, there was something emotional. It's like, okay, I get it now. That's why they're going to do the thing. Ask so what. So another example that I show, anybody who's looking and wants to type in the screen, what is the call to action in this discovery ad? Anybody want to throw anything in the chat window?
I'm not seeing anything yet.
It's like if you saw this, I think this ran both as a
So is it click here? Click here to buy the tickets?
I'm surprised somebody actually even saw this one, because most people see this and they miss it completely. Because that's the question. It's like the first time you see it, do we know what they want us to do? So we could argue, well, I guess the call to action is that we want them to click and buy the tickets. Because otherwise, looking at this, you're like, well, I don't know. Are we supposed to explore it? Are we supposed to visit it? Are we going to visit the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit? You know, maybe we should even say visit the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibition. Click here to buy the tickets. Another copy hack when you're writing calls to action is to write it in the first person. This is great for potentially for like buttons and things on websites if you have the ability to control buttons on your library's website. Not everybody does. So in other words, an answer to a question might be, I want to visit. I want to buy tickets. You know, and that's the button that they're clicking on. I want new bestsellers now. Because then I'm like, oh, yes, I do. Which that goes back and forth. You know, if the action you want them to take, that part can be the I, because I know that almost contradicts the part where I said earlier, use you language. But when they're actually clicking or doing the thing, one of the things that helps get, you know, especially in an online environment, gets buttons clicked is when it says, yes, send me my blank now. So there's an example of a call to action from the Edmonton Public Library in Canada. So I love that, you know, get a library card, and the card makes you smart. There's a really clear call to action. There's a big giant button on the website. Sign up our e-newsletter now. So the good news is there's a really clear call to action right there. Bad news is it's really generic. And I don't know why I want your e-newsletter, which means chances are people aren't going to click that button and sign. The good news is there is a button. It's clear. It wants an action. Bad news is it's not a very compelling message as to why I'm going to sign up for your newsletter. You know, if it said, get all of our best sellers and be the first to hear about new books and new movies that the library receives, and then the button said sign up, then you've got a more compelling call to action in a marketing message.
Jennifer?
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know we have about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. I think I hit 5 slides. So here's another, we think about powerful questions and hooks to engage and to pull folks in. And this is the key when we're talking about the copy formulas and hacks. And we already talked about it a little bit earlier when we were talking about the story of like, oh my God, you know, this might be thinking about the story of the librarian who took the Chilton's book to the guy who did the interview. She's like, okay, what's the question? What would paint the situation? You know, when it's kind of like Joe was going to miss his interview. It can mean say Joe was going to miss the first interview he'd snagged in 6 months. That's a hook because you want to know the rest of the story. It's powerful and it's emotional. It doesn't have to be fancy or complex. But starting off with that means, okay, I want to know more. So these are some examples of other common pull questions or hooks. Like, do you want to hear stories and writing tips from your favorite authors, but you don't want to get out of your PJs? So this could be something talking about electronic resources and or one of the apps that the library offers for ebooks. This gets back to when we talked about the common story arcs and, you know, whoop, climax, and then, wow, yay, we got to the end, hero got to the end of the quest. This common copy template works in almost every situation. It's called problem agitation solution. And you make sure that it's customer and user focused, but you're identifying a problem. Agitate the problem means, okay, and now it gets a little bit worse, and then there's a solution. That we're describing, you know, we're doing a little bit of describing life, you know, oh no, without the problem, and you know, what happens if the problem keeps going on? So again, this is the coffee maker. This is the example from the coffee maker, and it's about, oh, the problem is, what if you're always running late, and you're fighting with your spouse who took the last mug of coffee, and now you're buying overpriced coffee, and then the agitation is what makes it worse. Oh my God, I'm spending too much time and money buying overpriced cafe coffee, and I've just had to replace another burned out, cracked glass pot. Solution presented. The brighter mornings, happier spouse with the barista brew to 100. I wish I could tell you that was a made up name of a product, but that is actually the name of a coffee pot. The other common copy hack and formula you can use is something called before-after bridge. Before, here's what's going on currently. You're a stressed mom of toddlers and you have no idea what you're going to do with them this afternoon. After, imagine what the problem is like. Imagine a happy toddler this afternoon. The bridge is how you get them there. The special afternoon story times that your library is offering for 2 to 5-year-olds who aren't in school. You can think of almost anything that the library can do, and you think about, okay, here's what it looks like, problem-y sort of area. Here's what, imagine how much more wonderful they're going to feel after they've visited the library. Again, this is all from the hero, the customer standpoint. Here's how we get there. Now the sidekick comes in. Library service, library event, library program. So imagine creating social media images takes time. Imagine cutting 1 hour into 15 minutes. Here's how. I mean, that was a course I took recently. If you only ever use problem agitation solution in before-after bridge, you're already going to be on your way to talking about a library story that is formulated more in a way to actually inspire in action. You could also use the ADA is about getting attention, giving them the information in an interesting way because you are trying to build up desire for the service, the product, and you are asking them for a response. So in this case, the call to action for the example is as simple as want in. You know, it doesn't have to be too messy and it doesn't have to even be too pushy. The other one that we often use a lot is open loops. Marketing people call them copy cliffhangers. Our brains want closure, which is why if you started that story about John got his first job interview in 6 months, then you're going to then people are going to be like, well, I want to know what happens to John. And the open loop is it's going to stay open until you close it at the very end with, and the library, our librarian Sue delivered the Chilton's manual to John in the next town over. Oh, by the way, he got the job. You've closed the loop, but people are going to keep reading until they find out what happened to John. Did John get the interview? Did he get there? So you can absolutely use that type of shortcut to tell a library story. And just remember that no matter what, you're telling the story of your library every day. And the more you work on these different types of stories, the more you can get the rest of your community to share them and help you. The more you can turn around and give those same story to key stakeholders, to your bosses, to your deans, to your directors, to your boards, so that they can tell that story. I mean, think about how more powerful it could be in terms of library funding when you've got a key council person walking around with the story of John who needed the interview and he wasn't going to make it because his car broke down, and Sue saved the day by getting him that Chilton's manual. He's going to remember that because it's a powerful story. There's emotion there. And if you can make that shortcut for them, they'll keep telling that story and advocating for you. So the last one is just, those are some extra resources. If you get the PDF from all of this, hopefully everything is hyperlinked as it should be. They are some of my favorite resources in terms of copywriting from beyond the library world. That's a picture of me holding Ann Handley's book, Everybody Writes, that I actually shared it a couple summers ago on Instagram. And Ann Handley did respond back to me. So I'm like, yay, there's a win. Questions, thoughts, comments. Hopefully we didn't completely, overwhelm you. That's how you get in touch with me. That's how we can talk further about all of this. But also here, what other thoughts, what other questions have come up for you? What are you excited to go off and tell a story about? Which one of those stories could you tell in the next 30 days?
So we did have a couple questions come in, and I'll go ahead and ask those. But I also like Jennifer's question about what could you tell a story about. So please share that as well. So one of the questions is, how do you make collecting stories part of your library's culture?
Oh, that's a great one. One way you can do, is it's making it easy. What system or process, what form can you set up online that you can walk around with where it's easy to collect, including if somebody wants to collect something anonymously, where somebody can say, hey, tell me about a time when, the library helped you do something. If you even just tell me about a time when, and you either have it on a form, you have it on a piece of paper, and you can ask people either at the moment something happened, if they've left a comment. The quicker and easier it is you can actually ask somebody for feedback or a comment or a testimonial, and the easier and shorter you make it for them to give you that story, the more likely you'll be able to collect more of them. And if you need to, you can obviously promising patrons that you're not going to share their names or photos unless they say, yeah, sure, tell me, all about the news.
Sure. Great, thank you. Another question is, I've heard that quotes make it more likely that your news release will be printed, but they also make for long releases. Do you have thoughts on this topic?
Pull quotes are pretty important because, and pull quotes get back, you might have to think about shorter pull quotes. The main thing actually started in terms of the press releases, the hook comes first. They need to know, why is this a story? And go back to the very first slide with the dog and the cat. Why does my community care? In this case, of the journalist, they're thinking to themselves, why do my readers care? So the more that the pull quote helps answer the question, why the community needs to care, the more likely that that's going to be one that's really essential to the press release and helping to ensure that that story gets picked up. If the release is a little bit long, I think you're less likely to have pushback from the media versus if the story isn't interesting, if there's no story actually there, if the release doesn't answer the question of why do I care?
Why do I care? Another question of, and this will be our last one as we're almost out of time. I'm putting together a story gathering toolkit for some libraries. Do you have advice on what should be included in this?
Oh, wow. I'm excited. What's in the kit already? That would help to know. You're gathering stories from patrons, you're gathering stories from staff, all of the above.
I think on like from patrons. So how do we pull together a kit on how do we gather story from patrons?
The biggest one you can go back to is start everything with tell me about a time when. Ground the story in a specific time and instance. It could even be, hey, thinking back to last week, tell me about a time when. That's going to help you actually get a story out of the patron, because what we tend to ask is, so has the library helped you lately? We're like, no. Help them to be able to remember back into their head an actual instance. And then some of it's going to be giving yourself the help for what the follow-up questions will be. Tell me what that looked like. Tell me what it felt like. Ask them questions so you can try and bring out the emotion and that they felt in a particular time. What was it like to show up? What did it feel like when you showed up at story time? What did it feel like when you were able to get that ebook at home in the middle of the night when you couldn't sleep and you had insomnia? So those will be some of the best tricks. That's going to help you get better stories, and that's actually empirically proven.
And Kathy just suggested to make a Mad Libs template that patrons can help fill in to help them tell the story. I like that idea too.
You could even tell that, you could break that down to, tell me about a time last week when you used the library, and you can even circle, here's, I'm thinking of noun, verb type things, but service, app, program, event, help give them the prompts so that they don't remember everything the library does. So literally have the list and have them circled. Yeah, that was when I used the app. That was when I went online. That was when I used.
I love it.
The less they have to try and pull it out of their own head, the better you're going to get a better story.
That's great. So we are out of time. And I did want to quickly mention again that this recording and Jennifer's slides will be posted on the WVLS Continuing Education page later today. And I did put that link in the chat area. So if you do want to go back and listen or look at things on her slides, those will be available. So we do have the last webinar in the series coming up 2 weeks from now, October 29th, same time, 1 o'clock. And that will be presented by Patrick Sweeney on effective messaging for library support. So I think that will really tie in nicely with what we've talked about so far. So thank you, Jennifer, for an excellent webinar and for the excellent information. And thanks to all of you for listening, for your participation today, for your questions, for your comments. That was just excellent. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. So long.